So you have appeared on ITV's This Morning, on BBC Morning, on the Secret Leaders podcast, and many others. What advice would you give to entrepreneurs on, I guess, speaking and overcoming imposter syndrome? Because it's something that everyone seems to feel, or 99% of people feel imposter syndrome, and it holds them back. And then very few people go, nah, forget about it, and they just do it anyway. How do you do it anyway? How do you overcome imposter syndrome?
I don't think I've had imposter syndrome in the past from hearing friends describe it. Yeah. I have a real problem with perfectionism, so I get unbelievably stressed about about almost anything until I feel like it's at a good enough standard. So I get really worried I'm not going to do a good job, particularly the first time doing live TV. Like doing live TV is, and you know, you're wandering out there just thinking about all the different things that can go wrong. I find if the stage is big, I'm always really stressed before I go on it. You know, I've got like almost 10 years of experience of doing this stuff, and I'm always, even if I'm doing all hands in our own company, I'll be kind of like, oh, you know, I'll try and do a good job. But I think that's because I care about doing a good job. Yeah. I think I'm lucky that my brain focuses on trying to do something well, rather than being like, I don't deserve to be here. In my experience, as soon as the lights go on, for some reason my brain just kicks into gear, and then I find it fun and relaxing. But the time beforehand is unbearable. Yeah. So I'm giving absolutely no practical advice on any one of these different things, other than it just sucks and you have to weather the storm over and over again. Yeah.
You just have to do it, basically.
Yeah, that's why people say resilient. I just think resilience is the most important thing to focus on. I don't think there are many ways to make it less bad. I think there's just ways to, I think you just have to get used to tolerating endless problems. The number of times when I've said to myself, this is rock bottom, you know, something's gone catastrophically wrong, and then something else, and I've been like, well, at least this is what rock bottom feels like, and then you just find out another kind of sea floor. But it all just makes you stronger, and then I think you're able to deal with just a wider range of stressful situations, and you're able to put the accelerator down harder in the business and test its limits further, because you've got to, you know, withstand those sorts of problems.
Yeah, it's pouring it down outside. You can't control the rain, but you get better at holding the umbrella, for lack of a better expression. Yeah. Okay, cool. Being frugal as an entrepreneur can be really important, you know, especially in the early days. For example, you ate the same baguette with spinach every single day. Why do you think it's important to have this frugal mindset as a founder?
Well, at the time it was fiscally important because me and my co-founder were each paid just not very much money, which we did probably until 5 years into the business. After we'd raised, you know, over £10 million, we kept our pay really low, and we could afford to do it because we were young, we didn't have kids, stuff like that. It's really interesting actually, because I used to listen to podcasts like How I Built This and like lots of like startup-y podcasts that focus on the companies that were sort of successful 2017, 2018, people raising kind of mega giant rounds. Yeah. And it's all of it was about talent density and you know, empowered product teams and whatever. None of it was on cost control. Mm. And I actually got really sick of listening to those podcasts. And one of the main ones that I listen to at the moment is this podcast called Founders that
I love Founders.
Yeah, which is fantastic, and it's basically just like biographies, and you know, and biographies of people from Estee Lauder to the guy who started Dunkin' Donuts and everyone. And you realise that the common thread isn't that they were obsessive about talent density or they were obsessive about whatever it was. They were obsessive about cost control, like really often crazy. About how they were controlling costs inside the business, and that's how they developed their competitive advantages. And you know, there are different ways of doing that, but our business has been a lot bigger in the past. Like through the pandemic, we raised a lot of money, we grew the team. There was probably 150, 160 people in the business, and then we downsized it. You know, we had a kind of very serious spike in demand. Obviously, people were worried about dying, and the death rate actually went up. Yeah. Now our business is 66 FTEs, and is double the size that it was in 2021. So it's less than half the size of the headcount, and it's more than double the size of revenue, and the velocity is probably, without exaggerating, I would say 4 or 5 times faster in terms of product velocity and in terms of just our average time to getting anything done. And we're quite horribly understaffed, I would say. Like, it's stressful. It's not plain sailing. Like, every day we have teams that are stressed, and that is sort of where I want the business to be. We have high performing people who thrive in that kind of environment, who are up for a bit of stress, and then take a lot of satisfaction out of doing things that weren't obviously possible. And I would never want to run a business in a different situation again. Yeah. It forces you to prioritize. And I wasn't trying to make a point by eating that sandwich, El Clasico, is what me and Tom called this sandwich. Yeah. I wasn't trying to make a point. That was literally it took very little time. Yeah. And it cost next to no money. And I am just really frugal in my own life. Sure. It's quite a weird vibe when you start having people, executives in the business or whatever, who are very flashy or paid loads of money or living ostentatiously, or you're starting to do those sorts of things inside a company. I think there are some benefits that definitely make sense, like having a really nice office. If you don't have a nice office, then it's pretty difficult to get people to want to come in. And if you don't, if occasionally we'll get people lunch and stuff like that, and it's just a nice vibe at work. So it's worth spending some money, but it's important to, if particularly in consumer services, every pound that we save as a business is a pound that we can return to our customers, which allows us to grow our market share. So it's frugal strategically rather than frugal just to make a point. Yes. Yeah.
But the reason it's not on all of those podcasts is because it's less sexy to talk about, saving money, cutting costs, as opposed to just spending crazy amounts of other people's cash to try and capture the market before anybody else does, right? But you're right. I was just listening to the Rolex episode of Founders.
Oh yeah, me too.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. Sorry. We are so in sync, and it just came out the other day, right? And the amount of cash that he saved in the early days of, he was literally buying other people's watches and then putting the logo on them and everything. It was basically every entrepreneur that's achieved something massive and great, they had to go through that grind to get there. With the exception of perhaps the Googles and the Amazons that just had a different route to market and business, right? Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's the reason why it's not talked about as much. But I think the other reason, really, Dan, is that people struggle just to do that. Like they get a little bit of money and they're like, okay, great. Forget the baguette with spinach. I'm going for the BLT. I'm going for the whole shebang. And then it becomes really, really hard because there's little transactions every day. They add up to being the cash that you would have had to make the first hire, or to spend it on that marketing campaign, or to do this or to do that. So why do you think people struggle to have the self-discipline needed to sacrifice now and take the short-term hit for the long-term gain? I think it's just lack of experience, and then it's also all the kind of signalling of, the majority of press releases you see in startup are, we just raised £1 billion, like hooray, this is fantastic. And obviously those are huge milestones for businesses. But if I go back in time and think through the different raises that we've done, where the message to our team internally and via the press was like, fantastic, we've raised 20 million quid. Yeah. The message should have been, I've got some terrible, terrible news for you. We've raised loads of money. Now we have to go 5 times faster, and we're going to have to do it on less resources because we're closer to having some sort of exit event or floating the business. Like, you thought this was hard before. We're halfway up a mountain and the next bit is steeper. Yeah. This is very bad news for all of you that we've raised this money. And instead, it's just a completely different tone. Hooray, the magic money tree has grown some more money. No, this is getting increasingly serious. People are going to get let go who don't make it to the next stage of the process. The talent bar is rising, the pressure's rising, the heat is rising. We're going to have to do more with less and go faster across all of those different vectors. That should be the message when you raise money, not, oh, this is great, now we can all just chill out because we've got through this next sprint. Yeah. And since I started the business, there was a kind of amazing bull run in venture funding, and I don't regret that at all. I was there at the right time, but it did establish some funny incentives. Yeah. Created weird reflexes and behaviors in the venture industry, and right now, so many companies are doing trade sales, completely going out of business, recapping. And
And it's not hard to see why. It's very, very difficult to turn a company around from just being growth at all costs to being profitable. And we spent 2 years doing that. It was very hard. It had like full cultural change, strategic change, like focus on our margins. It's very difficult. And it's that there's a Charlie Munger thing about, if you want to look at how an organization behaves, and just look at the incentive structure. And the incentive structure for at least a few years. And my VCs are not guilty of this. They're seriously experienced operators who understand the exit market, but still there was a bit of, okay, well, if we hit these top line figures just in the general market, then that's great. You don't need to think about bottom line. So I think that's where it all comes from. It's very difficult to say to your team, no, we have to do more with less. If they can say, well, why don't you just go and raise some more money? It's really easy to do.
Love the Charlie Munger reference. Rest in peace to our dear friend Charlie. I don't know if you saw the Founders episode where they were interviewing him over dinner, but that was incredible. Is it the only podcast he's ever done?
Yeah, it was great. It was great. Then my favourite one of those is Rose Blumpkin. Have you ever listened to that?
Yeah, probably, but I've listened to so many.
Warren Buffett's favourite entrepreneur. This absolutely crazy woman from, I think, Odessa or Minsk, who ran this kind of discount furniture warehouse, and just I think my favourite entrepreneur of all time, having listened to that. Yeah.
You mentioned a few times around doing more with less just then, and we have seen that over the past 18 months with Twitter firing a big chunk of their workforce, and then all the other tech companies from Meta to Amazon to Google copying, and the results and the market share and the valuations are continuing to skyrocket and go up and up, despite having a much smaller workforce. Which you've done on a different degree, but achieving more with less. And I really hope and feel like that is going to be what continues to be the market sentiment moving forward, because as a fully bootstrapped founder, it kind of is a little bit annoying to see people that have raised all this money, but they're losing money every single month, and that gets a headline, right, in TechCrunch or whatever, right? Whereas I prefer, or at least I appreciate the organic growth of trying to hit profitability as quickly as possible, reinvesting that money back into the business and that sort of thing. But doing more with less, do you agree with me that that's hopefully going to stick around and that's a good thing?
Definitely. I think depending on the growth rate of a company, it almost should be getting smaller every year unless your growth rate is above a certain rate. And even in the time since I started the business, software development is such a different practice. There's a lot of tech companies and software companies where the difficult bit about building the technology isn't the software engineering. It isn't necessarily a complicated engineering challenge. It's more the artistry of how you put a business together so that the data is right, the velocity is really high, and you can build stuff on top of it, and you're not creating something that's really difficult to maintain. So I think that kind of craftsmanship of building a modern, flexible tech stack that allows you to respond really quickly and change things and test things is a kind of a different challenge to lots of software engineering challenges 10 years ago. And I think that naturally means that you need smaller teams with better quality of communication rather than lots of teams, because there was just so much technical work to do. So, I mean, frankly, I love that stuff of it's just more fun working in a small team, getting something done. It's just so much more satisfying. And then you have all these different tools around it that help people to massively increase their impact. So we've built lots of tools internally to allow each person who is customer facing in our team to, on average, handle 10 times the number of customers than our competitors do. And that's, most of it isn't AI. We've last 6 months started building some quite interesting AI tools, relatively simple ones, into our software. But it's basically just having really good workflows and no silver bullets, just week on week making little changes to our technology and to our processes to allow people to deliver incredible quality of service with very, very low effort. Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned AI a couple of times there. We've spoken about AI over email. What are your thoughts on the technology? Are we all going to be, living in a utopian future, or is it going to be the end of the world? Where's AI heading?
I think it's truly, truly terrifying, and I'm astonished that more people don't hold that view. 1,000 times more concerned about AI and the future of humanity than I would be about climate change or nuclear war or anything. And I really mean 1,000. And then it's also really exciting and really fun, and I use it every day for everything. Some of the things that I worry about are, people say, well, what impact does it really have on our lives? Well, okay, the average person that you see looks at their phone for 5 hours a day. And in China, for some demographics, it's 7 or 8 hours a day. And most of the content that's being consumed is short form videos, where people used to think that if in the YouTube algorithm, AI would help you to find the content that you want to watch. Whereas actually what it's done is inform content creators about the type of content that hijacks your brains. Little silly dances and colourful things. And then content creators, which is the #1 job that kids want to do in the whole world, create this content that is hijacked and hardwired into people's brains, and everyone spends 7 or 8 hours a day watching it. So already AI has monopolised the half of your waking hours during the day to watch a bunch of stupid crap.
Already. And we've just started.
We've literally just started, and people are saying, how's AI going to change anything? It's completely transformed the day-to-day life of almost everyone who's a teenager in their 20s or early 30s. The average person I know has no attention span, myself included. Like we have an absolute attention crisis, which then leads to people being really dissatisfied in their lives, not able to focus on things, not able to kind of build relationships with each other, because you've just got this kind of dopamine cycle of everything so exciting on your phone. So I think that is really terrifying and increasingly terrifying. And then the other thing that I always get really distressed by is I think there's multiple phases to this. I think people talk about, well, is it really intelligent? And it draws a hand and it has 6 fingers on it. It must be so dumb. And I think the rubric for defining intelligence is completely out of whack, where people are comparing it to this human style of intelligence. If worms ruled the world and they were looking at a human, they'd say, what a stupid human can't dig a hole, or whatever it is that worms like to do. And we're looking at this, it's put 6 fingers on a hand. If intelligence is your ability to process information and do something vaguely useful with it, we're not I know this sounds really lame, but we're not the apex predator anymore. Sure. There is something that can do that so much faster. That is an unbelievably readily available tool today. And this is day 0 in terms of development of that technology. It doesn't take tons of computational power once the model is built. So it's not like nuclear weapons in that you can actually control some like materials that are hard to get hold of. So I think we're about to enter a horrific phase of cyber security problems. And it's already starting. Like if you look at all of the leading indicators of cybersecurity issues, they're massively, massively up. So fraud and cyber stuff is going to become a real issue. Then that on a kind of corporate and international level, I think is going to get really, really dangerous. And I think that's going to be dovetailed with this kind of general... One thing that I think is great about being a human is that we're really creative. And I used to think maybe AI won't crack creativity. I think that ship has already sailed. Yeah. Music makes great music, and can make great art, can write things that are genuinely moving and synthesize. If you have great writers who've read all this different stuff and they've compiled their ideas and they have their interesting experience, well, how about you multiply that by 1 million and you read every book that's ever written? You can synthesize that stuff in different ways. Like, we're doomed there, and I worry about people's motivation to do anything in a world where we're not the most intelligent thing on earth in terms of information processing, and we also are creatively second rate compared to the volume and quality of work that an AI can do. So I'm really worried about a kind of downgrading of the human spirit. And then on the kind of final stages of it, there's all kind of manner of like terrifying sci-fi things to consider. And I think it is like a pretty relatively intractable to design something if worms were trying to design a piece of technology to keep humans at bay, I think they'd have quite a tough time. Sure. So I don't know if that's actually possible. And then I'm only 50% confident this stuff is going to go horribly wrong. Yeah. But I'm only X% confident that something terrible is going to happen with climate change. Yeah. But the level of catastrophe could be complete eradication of humans. And again, I know that makes me look like a crazy nut job, but that's what's at stake. No matter what the percentage is, it's like the potential for catastrophe and for eradication of the wonderful things that make being human so special is like truly terrifying.
I'm with you, man. I lay in bed thinking about this stuff at night.
Yeah.
The number is not zero, is it? Like, in terms of the percentage that AI could end the world, the number's not zero. So what is the number? Is it 5%? Is it 10%? Is it 20%? Is it 50%? I don't think anyone really knows, and that's the scary part. It could be 100%, and we don't know. One thing that the big question when it comes to AI, right, is, I've asked this many times before on the podcast, but is consciousness in the way that we have consciousness uniquely biological? Or if we give enough computing power and enough GPUs to something, does it wake up? Does it become self-aware? I don't think anyone really knows the answer to that question, but from a gut feeling, what do you think? Do you think it will wake up?
I'd say I think you just inevitably end up in a kind of semantic discussion about what consciousness is. So it's a tough question to answer, but my inclination to the question of, could you have something that massively supersedes humans' experience to think freely or to feel things? 100%. That feels like absolutely logical. And to the question about what the percentage is, it depends on the time frame, but I see it as very difficult for that number to not be pretty much 100% on a long enough time frame. I can't imagine how it won't happen, honestly, unless we experience some kind of medieval technological regression. And I hold out hope that will be a complete nirvana of everyone having a great time, and it'll be really fun and interesting. I just can see so many different ways for it to go wrong, rather than for it to go right. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Well, look, if it did go wrong, and if we became the apes and AI became the humans, right? You know that ending well because you deal with the business of death. Okay. As somebody that spends their time speaking with and operating in that world, what do you think makes a life well lived? Oh, great question. How interesting. Well, I don't know, and it's so individual, but I think there's probably a couple of different bits to. I think that's sort of your life's work in a way. Is to figure out what your own answer to that question is. It's a pretty difficult one. Otherwise, we'd be able to read a book or learn that at school, how to lead a great life, rather than spending the average day wondering if you're doing it right or wrong. And I think having the opportunity to ask that question of yourself is really lucky in the first place. There's loads of people who just don't necessarily have that. Yeah, they're not thinking about that. They're thinking about where to get food from. Exactly. So I'd say, but if you have the chance to ask that question, then I'd say it's giving that a good crack at saying, well, what does that mean for me, and then doing that at the kind of in the most full-on way that you can. And if that's like having a family, then great. That is a great answer to what's life all about. Be the best dad in the world. Yeah, exactly. Really go for it. Yeah. I think that's a pretty unavoidable one from a biological level and a social level. And if you chat to anyone who's got kids and say, how do you feel about having kids? Yeah, it's really hard. Obviously, loads of people say it's really hard, really difficult. But people just love their kids so much. It makes sense that they love their kids so much. And I think to one level, it's like, well, focusing on getting as much, love into your life as possible is a great way to spend your time. And that can be in community stuff. It can be loving at work. It can be partners and kids. That's a pretty safe bet, I'd say. And then I do think the right amount of struggle is quite a necessary component, because you can get a bit bored or unchallenged, or I think you need to be stressed and sad and whatever to appreciate other things like that. Yeah. So it's so individual, and people have the value system of what they're going to treat as important in their life relative to everyone else who's around them. Sure. And I think that's why that challenge is getting increasingly difficult. If you're a caveman and pretty much the only social vector for competition is do I have the biggest cave or whatever it might, the biggest club? Fair enough, you're going to be somewhere on a pecking order that probably isn't completely unpalatable. Now no one's looking at the size of the cave next door. It's just you're exposed from unbelievably early age to every possible vector of competition. and only really seeing the very successful side of it in terms of work and looks and social following or whatever. And this is not a novel point at all, but you know, whenever people say, oh, mental health is terrible in Gen Z or whatever, I think, yeah, it is terrible. And it makes absolute evolutionary sense why it's terrible, because your brain rewards you for successful competition. And the playing field has gone from your local village or what's around a kitchen table to the entire world, only filtered by the most beautiful, successful people. It's a hellscape.
And it's happened in 5-10 years.
Yeah, and it's AI powered. It's literally an AI powered hellscape that is like ruining people's sense of self-worth. Yeah, which is why I have I don't have any social media apart from LinkedIn, which I'm addicted to. Yeah. Strava as well. That's pretty much the only apps I look at. So I think it's a really, really interesting challenge. And again, when you talk to anyone who's got kids about how they let their kids interact with technology, it's the main issue of the age for parents.
Oh, absolutely, man. I've got a 1.5-year-old, right, and we don't really give him technology. He's 1 year old, but if he watches something on TV, it's so easy to see how addictive it is. Like it's like the content's being filtered through an algorithm to be as enticing as possible, with all the colours and changing every couple of seconds. And it's like watching a TikTok video, but it's half an hour long and it's designed for children. It's crazy. But separate topic. Yeah.